Vivaksho mukato bumno Vani vagvyahritam tayoho Jale tatasya suchiram Miradho samajayata Vivakshaho, when there was a need to speak. Mokataha, from the mouth. Bumnaha, of the Supreme. Vanihi, fire or the controlling deity of fire. Vak, vibration. Vyahritam, speeches. Sayaho, by both. Jale, in the water. Cha, however. Etasha, of all these. Suchiram, a very, very long time. Niradaha, suspension. Samajayata, did continue. Translation, Translation, when the Supreme desired to speak, speeches were vibrated from the mouth. Then the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth, but when he was lying in the water, all these functions remained suspended. Purport. The peculiarity of the gradual development of the different senses is simultaneously supported by their controlling deities. It is to be understood, therefore, that the activities of the sense organs are controlled by the will of the Supreme. The senses are, so to speak, offering a license for the conditioned souls who are to use them properly under the control of the controlling deity deputed by the Supreme Lord. One who violates such controlling regulations has to be punished by degradation to a lower status of life. Consider, for example, the tongue and its controlling deity, Varuna. The tongue is meant for eating, and men, animals, and birds each have their different tastes because of different licenses. The taste of human beings and that of the swine are not on the same level. The controlling deity, however, awards or certifies a particular type of body when the particular living entity develops a taste in terms of different modes of nature. If the human being develops taste without discrimination, as does the swine, then the controlling deity is certainly certified for the next term to award him the body of a swine. The swine accepts any kind of foodstuffs, including stools, and a human being who has developed such indiscriminate taste must be prepared for a degraded life in the next life. Such a life is also God's grace, because the conditioned soul desired a body like that for perfectly tasting a particular type of foodstuff. If a man gets the body of a swine, it must be considered the grace of the Lord, because the Lord awards the facility. After death, the next body is offered by superior control, not blindly. A human being, therefore, must be on his guard as to what sort of body he is going to have in the next life. An irresponsible life of indiscrimination is risky, and that is the declaration of all scriptures. So it's a bit of an esoteric section here, how the whole process of creation takes place. Ultimately, it's there's a personality behind everything. This particular section, we're hearing about how everything was motivated in this creation by the second Purush avatar, whose name is... Whose name is? He's the first one. No, he's not one of the Purush avatars. He's a Manva avatar. Garbhadakshay Vishnu, go to the top of the class. So Garbhodaksha Vishnu, everything is manifesting from him. As we know, all the universes come from the body of the first Purusha avatar, Mahavishnu or Karanadoksha Vishnu, and Garbhodaksha Vishnu enters into each universe. And he lies down on what? Seshnaga, who's lying on...
The ocean sweat? His sweat?
Well, yeah, but there's a name for it, not just sweat. Causal ocean is Karanadoksha Vishnu. Karana and causal, it's the same. So, is the Garbhodak ocean. Garbhodak ocean. Garbhodaksha Vishnu lies down the Garbhodak ocean. So Garbha, what does Garbha mean? I mean, there's lots of different names, but it's Garbha can refer to womb. Like sometimes Prabhupada uses the word amniotic fluid to describe the water of the Garbhodak ocean. Where do we find the amniotic fluid in the body? In the womb. So we have Garbhodana Samskara, it's the same word, Garbhodana Samskara. So when husband and wife desire to conceive a child, they perform Garbhodana Samskara, which basically, literally means purifying the womb. So it said that the consciousness of the husband and wife at the time of conception determines the consciousness of the child. So therefore, those who desire first-class progeny, they purify their minds, and at the time of conception, because of that purification, it attracts a pure soul into the womb. So anyway, this is the word Garbha, Garbhodaksha. Hare Krishna. And so from him the whole process of creation starts going, and from his navel we have the lotus stem which Lord Brahma appears on. And of course, from a material material point of view, all this is very fantastic, but this is the version of the Srimad Bhagavatam, so therefore as a devotee we can accept it. But it's no less fantastic than everything arrives from the result of a big explosion, like the Big Bang Theory. Everything, like we see, there's wars, so many wars going on around the world. Nothing is created by explosions. Everything is destroyed, but nothing is created. But nevertheless, of course, there are some crossovers. Like we know that when Mahavishnu is breathing out, all the universes are coming out, so everything is expanding. And the Vedas does say that the universe is constantly expanding until the end of the universe, and then it's all withdrawn back into the body of Mahavishnu. So scientists have established that the universe is expanding. Planets are, moving further away and further apart. So the conclusion was, if everything is moving apart, then logic would say at some point everything was all together. And so that's the basis of the theory. They say at one point everything is in a little tiny point. Singularity is the word they use, and from that everything exploded. But anyway, that's the theory. That's the predominating theory that they have at the moment. But from the Bhagavatam version, that there's a personality behind everything, and in this case, Garbhodaksha Vishnu, and everything that's within the universe at one point or another, one after another, is created. So we're hearing that when the Supreme desired to speak, speeches were vibrated from the mouth, then the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth. And so every verse, it gives us a bit of an understanding. Because as I said, it is quite esoteric, very difficult to properly understand and conceptualize the whole process. But Sukadev Goswami felt fit to include this in Bhagavatam, so therefore we're reciting it, there is some benefit to understanding how everything came into being. Of course, we could just say, well, God created everything, and that's not incorrect. But how he created everything, that can be of interest to, so step by step. Everything has a scientific system behind it. So when we're hearing about the different senses, we have the gross physical body made up of earth, water, fire, air and ether, and then the subtle body situated at the region of the heart, mind, intelligence, false ego. And within that subtle body we also have the subtle senses. Like we have the external manifestation of the senses, the nose, ear, mouth, eyes, etc. But in their original state, they're atomic in size, and they also, from body to body, they go with the subtle body. These atomic senses, or senses in atomic size, and as we said, they manifest in each body in the external shape of the senses that we have on the body. So they're also conditioned, just as the mind becomes conditioned according to the environment and a karmic destiny. So the condition that the senses become conditioned also, as Prabhupada says, according to our desires and according to our actions, we get awarded a particular body and a particular type of senses that we're attracted to certain things. So Prabhupada, he regularly uses the example of like the swine or the pig, that if one in the human form of life is indiscriminately eating anything and everything, then that's what a pig does. So why have a human body? Better you have a pig body, because that's what you want to do. You want to eat indiscriminately. And so even, the pig likes to have, at least in India, I don't know elsewhere in the world, but their favourite food is stools, and the fresher and the hotter the better. And so somehow or other, that jiva has been conditioned in a way that they're attracted to that sort of thing. So, of course, there are 8,400,000 different species of life, and every species has a particular conditioning according to the three modes: goodness, passion, ignorance. So, but we can't blame anybody else. It's basically due to our own desire, and Krishna is basically sanctioning. As Super Soul, he's simply, if we've got the desire, so he's sanctioning. That if that's what you want to do, you go ahead, but there will be consequences. And those consequences, as Prabhupada mentions, that the taste of human beings and that of the swine are not on the same level. The controlling deity, however, awards or certifies a particular type of body when the particular living entity develops a taste in terms of node of nature. So we get what we desire. So in the human form of life is basically a life of responsibility. We have free will, which other non-human species don't have. It's only in the human form of life we have free will to act. But along with that free will, we're also given intelligence. So a simple definition of intelligence is the ability to discriminate between right and wrong. And if we choose to discriminate in an incorrect way, then, as we said, there's going to be some sort of consequences. And if we get very deep into that indiscriminate life, then we can lose this human form of life in the next birth. We can take on another species that's more suited to our particular desire that we've been developing. Prabhupada mentions, like when he came to the West, and it was like the big hippie sort of era, in the late 60s and the 70s. And these hippies, they were very fond of being naked. When Prabhupada went to the Morning Star Ranch in California, and there was like he was invited there, and this big hippie community, and he went there to give a presentation, and all the hippies turned up naked, And, so Prabhupada, he mentioned that, for those who are very attached to be unclothed, next life they can be a tree. That's what they want to do. They can stand exposed to the elements for many, many years. So if we misuse our facility, misuse our free will, then our next life we become restricted according to that situation we find ourselves. So like in a tree body is very restricted. It can't move, it can't complain. It's afflicted by whether it's too hot, too cold, rain, snow, sunshine. So Bhagavad-Gita compares the body of a tree to be unborn child within the womb. It's very, very restricted, and it's at the mercy of the mother. The mother eats improper food. The unborn child gets affected by that. Too much chili or too much this, too much that. So it's a very, when a baby is born, everybody's clucking over it. Oh, how wonderful! But for the child in the womb, it's actually a very, restricted, situation. So according to a particular the particular body, we're restricted in one way or another. Because you can say that in the material world, the human form of life is the most conducive form for self-realization, in that we have free will. We can decide voluntarily to serve Krishna, to serve God's Supreme Personality. Other living entities in other bodies don't have that facility. But if we misuse the facility we have, then we have to accept. We become restricted in one way or another. It's like the law of nature. If it's not used, it gets taken away. You see people who are perhaps paralysed, paraplegic, and they're in a wheelchair. The legs never get used, obviously, because they're paralysed and they're just withering away. There's no muscle tone. They're withering away. So the law of nature says if we don't use it, it gets taken away. We're given something that we do want. So we need to be very cautious in a human form of life for using it, this vehicle, for what it's actually meant for. This is the Vedic instruction recommendation. So Nectar of Instruction by Rupa Goswami. First verse we hear Vacho Vegam Manasikroda Vegam Jiva Vegam Udara Pasta Vegam Etam Vegam Yo Vishahitu Dera Savam Apimam Pritivam Sashishat. So Rupa Goswami says, a sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So particularly I'm using this verse and refer to, the supreme desire to speak, and speeches are vibrated from the mouth. So if we control the tongue, the belly and the genitals, Prabhupada says, they're in a straight line. We control the tongue, everything else becomes under control. It's said, when we chant the Prasad prayer, Sadada Vijaya, everyone likes to chant it, but not everybody necessarily knows what it actually means. But it says that the tongue is the most ferocious of the senses. We like the pig. You end up being a pig is because you're not controlling the tongue. You want to eat anything and everything, or you want to speak so much nonsense, not things not related to Krishna. But so we control the tongue, and everything becomes controlled. So it says that person who's qualified to accept disciples is one whose mind and senses is fully under control. In the yoga system, you may be familiar with the Panchakusha. Has anybody Heard of that? Panchakusha? Know what that is? No yoga students here? Pancha means what? 5. And kosha means sheath. So it's described that the body has 5 sheaths. Has the Anamaya Sheath or kosha, Pranamaya, Manamaya, Vijnanamaya and Anandamaya. So anybody who does yoga course, they'll learn about these things. So Anamaya is this external material body, Anamaya kosha. Sometimes this translated as the food sheath. So it's that outermost covering, referring to the physical body which needs food and nourishment to thrive. It is believed to be the most vulnerable kosha, since issues with the physical body can manifest as unbalance or imbalance in the other layers. So if you look after the external body, we treat it, we keep it fit, we eat proper food, then that keeps the Anamaya sheath, the physical body, in a healthy condition, and all the other layers won't be adversely affected. Sometimes it's described that when you get a small child, anything you give them, what do they want to do with it? Put it in their mouth. That's Anamaya. That's the influence of Anamaya. They're exploring the world through their tongue, like that. So, but it's said that along with this theme of tongue and mouth, the Ayurveda says the 3 main causes of disease are, anybody knows according to Ayurveda? Uncleanliness,
anxiety and overeating.
Yes, very good. Overeating or improper eating. Yeah. So stress and overeating or improper eating and uncleanliness. The 3 main causes of disease. Actually, I did hear that sometimes children who are born, babies who are born, and they have that, what they call hole in the heart. And apparently I've heard, it's mentioned in the Ayurveda, the cause of that, or at least one of the causes, is while the child is in the womb, the mother is in extreme stress. And that affects the baby. And one of the effects is they can be born with that hole in the heart. There. So, this cause of stress can cause so many problems in so many different ways. And of course, proper eating. I mean, for us, it's anything that's prasad. But even then, overeating can be a problem, or eating too much rich food like that. And also uncleanliness. If we're living in an unhygienic state. I did read some time ago that, like in Britain, 17th, 18th century, living a very unhygienic life. All the refuse and the toilet waste was just thrown out of the house into the streets, and there was no understanding about germs and hygiene, etc. And at the beginning of the Victorian era, sort of early 1800s, the average age expectancy of a labourer was 17 years. Due to bad diet, due to bad hygiene, etc., etc. For an office worker, it was about 30 years. So very short lives. And due to this sort of reason, the average labourer's breakfast was beer and bread. That's what they subsisted on. That's basically all they could afford, because they could make it themselves. So you're not going to live very long in that sort of diet. So, of course, Pranamaya, after Anamaya is Pranamaya. That's the sheath of vital life force energy. We know prana, the life force. And this sheath is responsible for animating the physical body. It gives us energy. Third one is Manamaya, to do with the mind. It's the mental or psychological sheath, referring to the aspect of the mind which governs the perception of the world. So, of course, the mind is, we had that analogy in Bhagavad-Gita of the 5 horses of the senses, and they're connected to the chariot by the reins, and those reins are the mind. And the driver of the chariot is the intelligence. So, if the mind connects or joins the senses to the intelligence, so if the mind is under control of the intelligence, then we're going to see the world. Perception of the world is going to be, a proper understanding. In other words, from a spiritual point of view, it means everything is the creation of the Supreme Person, and as a jiva trying to come closer to Krishna, we're utilising everything in his service. But if our mind is not under control of the intelligence, then the senses are going to go wild, like horses out of control. So this is the role of the Anamaya Sheath. And above that, Vijnanamaya, the intellectual sheath. So this sheath is the seat of intuition. So sometimes it's said, Prabhupada say there is no such thing as intuition, this is simply super soul. But nevertheless, Prabhupada does use the word intuition, referring to the influence of super soul. In the human form of life, super soul manifests as intuition, or sometimes as a conscience, the subtle voice trying to guide us, closer to him. In the non-human form of life, super soul manifests as instinct. So it just instinctively they know what to do and how to do it and when to do it, according to the mode of nature of that particular species. And lastly is Anandamaya, the bliss sheath. So this sheath is the closest to the jiva, to the soul. So that's one yoga lesson, Yoga 101, Panchakusha. So going to Bhagavad-Gita, also the whole class is sort of themed about, as I said, the mouth and the tongue, etc., more or less. So 3 modes of eating, Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 17:8, foods dear to those in the mode of goodness, increases the duration of life, purifies one's existence, and gives strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. Such foods are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. So it's understood that on our tongue we have 6 different taste bud areas on the tongue. So a properly prepared food should have all 6 tastes. So it's sweet, sour, salty, bitter, astringent, and pungent. So a properly prepared food, at least according to Ayurvedic diet, all those 6 tastes are going to be there. So when we eat, we're going to be completely satisfied. You can imagine the only thing you ate was sugar. For a few hours or a day or so, that might be after a while. The last thing you want is sugar. Remember years ago, one devotee, I was staying at his farm in Dubbo, central western New South Wales, and he had a bumper crop of strawberries, and 3 times a day he was preparing something with strawberries in it. And I think after a week, no more strawberry. I don't think I ate strawberries for a year after that. It was just too much. They were delicious and fat and juicy, but there's only so much you can eat. So, but if the whole tongue is satisfied, then you're going to be, as a person, satisfied. The mind is going to be satisfied. And of course above that is prasad. It satisfies you spiritually, nourishes you spiritually as well. So when we offer our foodstuffs to Krishna, of course we want to cook everything nicely, but it's not that Krishna wants to eat. What he actually wants is our love. He wants that bhakti, that devotion, along with that offering. That's what he really is after. And 17:9, foods that are bitter, too sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry and burning are dear to those in the mode of passion. Such foods causes distress, misery and disease. So this goes back to improper eating. It can cause disease. So, Indian cuisine is known for being hot, too much chili. So chili, of course, is meant to be flavour. It breaks down the oil of the ghee and it helps you digest it properly, chili and ginger. But if you have too much, once again, that's going to upset the body. So I did hear that India has the highest rate of stomach ulcers in the world, and that's due to too much chili. You know, it's one time in Mayapur years ago, I was going for lunch, and all the lines for the Prasad hall were so long, but for the pilgrims line was quite short. And you know, just a local Bengali, so I got onto that line, and it was just so hot, you know, the dal and the sabji, and then they were handing out chilies as well, you know, like lollies, you know, and everybody was just eating, you know, chili, and they thought it was great, but I just couldn't eat it. So, yeah. So if you're having too, you know, it's too much for the body. And 1710, food prepared more than 3 hours before being eaten. Food that is tasteless, decomposed and putrid, and food consisting of remnants and untouchable things is dear to those in the mode of darkness. I was speaking to an Ayurvedic doctor in Perth. He was originally from South Africa. And he told me that, because he was doing an Ayurvedic course and I was catering for the course, and he was just interested to know that I was a devotee and it was prasad. And he said there were some tests had been made by doctors comparing the decomposition rate of prasad and regular food. And he said they actually found out that prasad decomposes much more slowly than regular food. So that was interesting to know that if you're offering it, you know, there's so many apart from being non-different from Krishna himself, it's also, you know, the health benefits there as well. In Bhagavatam 6.140, so we're just going on to mentions that then the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth. But when he was, so just going to fire emanating from Garbhodaksha Vishnu 6.140, in the purport Prabhupada mentioned the transcendental words of the Vedas emanated from the mouth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, so this is referring to supreme desire to speak, and speeches were vibrated from the mouth. So therefore the Vedic principles should be understood to be Vaishnava principles, because Vishnu is the origin of the Vedas. When he speaks the Vedas, obviously they come out of the mouth, and because he's Vishnu, they're principles that a Vaishnava is wanting to follow. So the Vedas contain nothing besides the instructions of Vishnu, and one who follows the Vedic principles is a Vaishnava. A Vaishnava is a real knower of the Vedas, as confirmed in Bhagavad-Gita. So it's understood at the beginning of every creation, Vishnu introduces the Vedas, the sound vibration, because we shouldn't just think that, you know, sometimes you hear, well, you know, you're quoting from your books, it's just a book, you know, but Sastra, Vedas is not just book, it's eternal sound vibration. And at a certain point in time, they're written down as books, but that sound vibration is eternal. And at the beginning of every creation, Vishnu, he introduces that sound vibration for the benefit of human society. And coming to this point of controlling deity of fire, Bhagavatam 5.20, verse 3 and 4, the demigod Chandra. Chandra is the demigod of the moon. Came from the mind of Narayan, which is interesting that Chandra came from the mind of Narayan. So we know the influence of the moon on this planet is like the tides, influence the tides, also influence the taste and nourishment of vegetables. You know, there is, his name was Rudolf Steiner, and he wrote a book called Agriculture for Tomorrow, and it was all based on experiments of planting according to the moon, and very detailed experiments, and they showed that if things that are like some plants that are planted at randomly, and some were planted according to the proper time, according to the moon, and there was like a vast difference. So planting according to the moon, the conclusion was planting according to the moon cycles is very beneficial. But also the moon, Chandra coming from the mind of Narayan, also the moon seems to affect our own mind, so therefore we get the word lunatic. And the full moon, people, either if there's some psych issues or just people with a sensitive mind, they can be affected by the full moon. Like that, I remember I used to work in the emergency ward in hospital in Perth years ago, and you could tell what days were the full moon because it was just chaos there. It was just amazing to, even without knowing what the moon was, you could say it's definitely full moon today. And the sun god came from his eyes, the controlling deity of fire was generated from his mouth. So this material body is made up of earth, water, air, fire, etc. So particularly fire, we know, if you're living, your body's warm, because fire, the Agni is in there, and particularly the Jata Agni, which is the fire of digestion. If you're like an incinerator, if you want to, burn something, you throw it in the fire and it's burnt to ashes. So Jata Agni is the same. You're eating and the fire of digestion is burning that and creates energy and nutrition. So I just had this one short story. I hope I fit it in. That Prabhupada mentions a human being therefore must be on his guard as to what sort of body he's going to have in the next life. So a devotee is very interested that we're doing our best to make sure our next birth is either we go back to Godhead or at least it's a very favourable birth to continue our spiritual life. So one way recommended is to get blessings from saintly people. It said if we're engaging in devotional service in this lifetime, it's due, one reason is due to having blessings from a saintly person in a previous life. And so that blessings will act on us, so it'll bless us to get a, favourable birth in the next life. So, of course, the gopis of Vrindavan were very much interested. Of course, their focus was Krishna, but their desire was that they wanted the blessings that Krishna would become their husband and they would be able to serve him forever and forevermore. That was their desire. So one time they approached Krishna and said, "This is our desire, Krishna. We want to be your husband and serve you forever." And Krishna says, "Yes, so you should go to Devasa Muni for blessings. He's just now across the Jamuna River and he's meditating in his ashram. You go over there and you ask for his blessings." Like that. So of course, when you go to see a saintly person, you need to take a gift, take some offering there. So the gopis, that was easy decision. They just had all their baskets and they filled them up with all these milk sweets, hundreds of milk sweets, to take to Devasa Muni. So when they got to Jamuna River was flooding. There was no way they could cross it. So what to do? So they went back to see Krishna and said, "Krishna, we can't cross the Jamuna River." And Krishna said, "Okay, so you go back to the Jamuna and you pray to Jamuna Devi that on the strength of Krishna's brahmachari vows, please let us cross." And all the gopis looked at each other. Brahmachari? Krishna's not a brahmachari. We're all his girlfriends. But anyway, they were simple village girls, so they went back to the Jamuna. They all big line up and, holding hands, and they made that prayer that Jamuna Devi, please, on the strength of Krishna's brahmachari vows, please allow her to cross. And Jamuna all of a sudden opened up and they were able to cross. So they went to Devasa Muni's ashram and they paid their obeisances and all sit down in front of him. And he was deep in meditation. But after a little while, he opened his eyes and saw the gopis there. Says, "Yes, what do you want?" And the gopis said, we want the blessings that Krishna will become our husband and we'll be able to serve him forever and forevermore. And Devasa Muni, yes, I bless you. And the gopis said, what? Just like that? He said, yes, you have my blessings. Now what did you bring? And the gopis said, well, we've got some milkshakes. Yes, so bring them here. So, Rasamalai, Rasgula, Sandesh, Burfi, he ate everything, hundreds of milk seeds, and he was completely satisfied. So Devasa Muni says, yes, very good, you can go now. So the gopis, they went back and they got to the Jamuna River and it was still flooding. So how do we cross? And so they went back to Devasa Muni. He says, oh great sage, we can't cross the Jamuna. What do we do? And Devasa Muni said, you go back to the Jamuna River and you pray to Jamuna Devi that on the strength of Devasa Muni's vow of subsisting only on the juice of the daba grass, please let us cross. So the gopis looked at each other. He just ate hundreds of milk sweets and he's saying that his vow of existing on the juice of the daba grass. Anyway, again, they were just simple girls, but they had a question. So, great sage, Krishna told us to cross over this side to the Jamuna River on the strength of his brahmachari vows, and we don't understand that. And Devasa Muni smiled and he said, yes, Krishna is endowed with an unlimited detachment. When he is in the rasa dance, he just walks away. In this way, he is a brahmachari because he is completely in control of his transcendental senses. So in that way, Krishna is a brahmachari. So they went back to the Jamuna and they said, oh Jamuna Devi, on the strength of Devasa Muni's vow of subsisting only on the juice of daba grass, please allow us to cross. Immediately Jamuna opened and they could cross. So they went back to Krishna and very happily all sat down around him and they said, yes, Devasa Muni has blessed us, but we just have one question. We took to him hundreds of milk sweets and he ate them all, but when we were coming back we couldn't cross the Jamuna, so he said, we pray to Jamuna Devi on the basis of his subsisting only on the juice of daba grass, but he just ate hundreds of our milk sweets. So what's going on? And so Krishna, he responded that yes, normally he does maintain that vow, but when he has opportunity to take delicious prasadam prepared by Brajavasis, by my own intimate devotees, he will do that. So in that way the gopis were completely satisfied. They received the blessings of Devasa Muni, and in that way they all become Krishna's husbands. So we can conclude that we need the blessings of saints to be successful in our spiritual life. So thank you very much. According to that, it's only 8:30. I think they had prasad a bit early, but I don't know if there's any question. We could just squeeze in.
Thank you. You mentioned about the Govardhana Samskara. So we know that the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, some of them didn't get that Govardhana Samskara, but they great devotees. So someone maybe nowadays say that it's nurture is more important, so we don't need to worry about Govardhana Samskara. So how would you, because either way, even someone who had Govardhana Samskara, sometimes they can do all nonsense. So the nature and nurture aspect.
Yeah. So like Satyananda Swami, his father was the official Nazi torturer in POW camps, and he's such an ecstatic, Vaishnava sannyasi. So how to understand that? So the principle is there. You try to get whatever benefit you can. So ideally, if you're going to conceive a child, you want the most benefit. The most advanced soul that you can, because that's what every parent wants, a first-class child that they can raise up in Krishna consciousness. So there's a system for that. So it may work, it may not. It just depends, because simply doing some sort of ritual like that, there is a recommended, expected benefit. But what's in a person's mind and heart also is going to have some effect, So, a life, it's like, okay, I'll do all sorts of nonsense at the end of the life. When I'm about to die, I'll chant Krishna and go back to Godhead. It doesn't work like that. In theory, it'll work, but if you're doing all nonsense all your life, at the time of death, you're definitely not going to be chanting Krishna, so that's it. Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Prabhupada Ki Jai.